In this brief scene from the film The Teacher, the father of a Palestinian prisoner reminds the father of an Israeli hostage about the extreme imbalance of Palestinian-Israeli prisoner exchanges.
They'll keep him alive as long as it takes.
How do you know that?
Because they know that your people believe your son is worth thousands of mine.
There are close to 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons, but reading about these numbers doesn't quite have the same impact as the personal, individual stories behind them. And this is where the power of filmmaking lies. We have with us today an award-winning Palestinian-British filmmaker who joined the film industry relatively recently after an established career in finance. Farah Nabulsi has made films that convey the harsh realities of life in Palestine, including The Present, which won a BAFTA award and was nominated for an Oscar, and most recently, The Teacher, her first feature-length film that has taken the film festival circuit by storm and was recently released in cinemas across the UK and Ireland. This episode was recorded on the 17th of September, 2024. I'm your host, Afaf Shawabibi, and you're listening to Tarwida. So welcome, Farah. It's really good to have you with us. We want to start with your journey from finance to filmmaking. And I'd like to ask you, were you always interested in film?
I've always loved film, and I've always loved cinema, theater, drama. I did a lot of drama at school as a teenager growing up in London. It's a world that I've always loved. But yeah, it wasn't something I went into studying. Though interestingly enough, people who knew me back then and still know me now say I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. They always knew I'd end up on one end of the camera or the other. So it's an interesting journey.
I actually wanted to ask you about that because I've heard you mention that before, that, you know, it's like you've come a full circle, and I was curious to know more about that. But you did end up choosing finance as a field to go into. And with that, after many years, you ended up reinventing yourself and changing careers. And I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, a business that you started came out of motherhood. Tell us a bit about this reinvention.
So every chapter that I have moved through has been a natural evolution of growth in who I am and what my priorities are and what I'm inspired by in many ways. So yes, I started off as an investment banker, and I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the travel. I loved the information. The money was great. And, you know, I have quite a mathematical sort of business-minded side to me. But then I had my babies and something shifted. All of a sudden, the world of finance became meaningless to me. And I wanted to align my career with my children. So that's when I decided to start a mother and child business concept, but for profit. And then what happened after that is I went to Palestine for the first time as an adult after 25 years of not having been. So I'd been as a child a number of times. And then around the first Intifada, my parents basically stopped taking us. And, you know, without sounding too cheesy, it changed me. And I came back to what I consider my life of privilege and spent about 2 years still running my business, but tearing my hair out, trying to figure out, you know, how this injustice, this colossal injustice could be.
Is that when you did the film Oceans of Injustice?
No. So, I mean, like I said, it took me 2 years of trying to figure out what to do. And in that period, I was going back and forward from Palestine, and I was writing personal therapeutic writings to deal with all of this injustice and that I'd witnessed with my own eyes, and was conversing with so many Palestinians on the ground about their experiences. And so Oceans of Injustice and Today They Took My Son and Nightmare of Gaza were all pieces that I adapted from these personal writings. So Oceans of Injustice, I guess, was an autobiographical kind of reflection of, we think we know and we think we feel with them and we think we understand the injustice, but there is so much more. So it was born of these trips and these travels and these, but it only happened 2 years later when I first thought about making them into audio pieces. And I did. I went to a studio, a little like this one, and I recorded them as audio pieces. And I let a few people hear them. And I put the headphones on them, and I'd come back sort of 10 minutes later and find them in tears, just absolutely broken. And I realized that there was something very powerful in these words. And then I thought, well, I've always loved film. And I really feel that considering technology has placed this communications revolution into the palm of pretty much every single Western citizen, I thought, cinema. I love cinema. Let's adapt these into short films. I don't know what that means. I don't know where it's going to land, but I'm going to do that. And so that's when I made those first 3 short films, which I didn't direct, by the way, just to be clear. I wrote and produced.
Right. But if advocacy or let's say promoting the cause wasn't a factor, do you think you would have gotten into filmmaking anyway?
Oh, what an interesting question. I don't know. I think any moves in life, there's usually some kind of conduit. But who knows, actually? I'd like to think that, maybe something else in the world, some kind of injustice or something that would have touched me deeply might have been that ignition to do it anyway, if you get my meaning.
Yeah.
I'm obviously connected to Palestine by way of my heritage, and basically my blood. But that's interesting. I don't know is the answer. I really don't know.
So I actually watched your latest film, The Teacher, at the Real Palestine Film Festival in Dubai last year. And in the talk back, you mentioned that if I can't bring people to Palestine to see for themselves what's happening, then I will bring Palestine to the people. I'm just paraphrasing here. But do you think you always have a specific audience in mind when you're making your films?
I make my films in the sense that I do want them to be seen. I'm not an artist who's like painting a painting and say, okay, if it's exhibited in a gallery, great. If it's sold, great. But if it's not, I'm going to hang it on my wall and just admire it myself and find some kind of pleasure from it. I want these films to be seen. As an artist, I don't mean just as somebody, as a Palestinian who feels that she's telling certain stories that must be heard and must be seen, yes. But as an artist, I want my work to be seen. I want people to experience it. I want to take audiences on this emotional journey. So I don't know if I have a specific audience in mind, because at the end of the day, of course, on the one hand, it's wonderful when Palestinians get to see my work. I just, someone had put on Instagram yesterday an image of, he's obviously in the cinema, and he's filming for a second, and he posted of the teacher. He's watching the teacher in the cinema in Ramallah, and his post said, I'm so happy to be watching a Palestinian film in a Palestinian cinema. Thank you, at Farah Nabulsi. And that brought, such joy to my heart when I saw that.
That's amazing.
On the other hand, if I'm screening in San Francisco in front of a audience that is not Palestinian and has, no connection in that sense, and they're also experiencing the film, that's really wonderful and important to me as an artist, but also very much so as a Palestinian who can see and feel that the film is resonating with that audience. That said, I am someone who's had one foot in the West, one foot in the Arab world, right, in Palestine. And I think I go where my creativity takes me, but I think naturally it takes me into this kind of hybrid of filmmaking where somehow by default I am looking at quite a wide, varied audience because I kind of stand on, in both worlds.
Right. And so if you were to think of these, like, let's say the Palestinian or Arab audience and the non-Palestinian or maybe Western one, is there a difference in reaction? I mean, obviously people are so happy to see a Palestinian film in a Palestinian cinema, but are there different reactions that happen, or you can't group it?
I mean, first of all, I guess it all depends on which films, but overall, the reaction is the same in the sense that, people who love it or like my films, regardless of where they're from, it's the same. Where I feel the most anxious sometimes is with a Palestinian audience, because I know that while these are fiction narrative films, they are very rooted and based and laced in truth and reality. And they're not period films and period dramas. They are a brutal reality that is taking place in real time on the ground. Even many people who work on the films with me experience that reality. Now, of course, it'll never be the same. And again, this is cinema and this is fiction narrative. But I am anxious when Palestinian audiences see it, just so that I know I haven't done their injustice, in my representation of it. Yeah. Now, one of the most beautiful things that Iman from Gaza stood up at a screening. He's from Gaza, he doesn't live in Gaza. And he stood up in the Q&A and he said, very emotionally, "Thank you, Farah. I've been waiting 30 years for a film like this." Now that just brings tears to my eyes. And this is during this past year, and this is the Teacher film. And then I get brilliant reactions from elsewhere in the world. But I'd say I'm not so anxious about those reactions. I know that they might be varied. I know that, my work is not everyone's cup of tea, not because of Palestine, just because of, stylistically, whatever it is, as well as, of course, there are many people who aren't going to be too thrilled with the narrative, because we're taking back the narrative that has been hijacked for so long. And that's obviously going to ruffle a few feathers. And some people are going to come out and say horrible things. And I don't really care.
So I want to ask you about your creative process, because you didn't study filmmaking formally. How did you get yourself up to speed with the process of filmmaking, as in from writing screenplays all the way through to production?
It's funny. I was at a Q&A yesterday. I was asked the same question, but they were film students at a university, and I was like, "Oh, they're all here studying film."
You're like, "Don't waste your money."
No, God, no. But it's more like, so for me, yes, absolutely no formal education in film, and it's very, I say, guerrilla style. Stanley Kubrick, he said the best education in film is to make one. And absolutely 100%, I agree with that, in the sense of, like, I don't think, even if I'd gone to film school, unless you're making a film, that's when you pretty much learn so much. And so having made now a feature film that was as challenging as The Teacher was, and in a place of military occupation and apartheid and colonization surrounding you and all the headaches that came with that, I think I've got a PhD in filmmaking now.
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, from things like attending the Robert McKee workshop, in Baker Street somewhere, or watching YouTube video interviews with, some of the great directors, or masterclass, or reading the books, speaking to people, watching many films that I know had an impact on me over the years, but I wasn't a filmmaker. So I couldn't tell you why they impacted me. And going back and watching some films, it's everything, anything and everything. But ultimately, it's making the films. And that's how I learn, to be honest. I will sit with my DOP, my cinematographer, and I'll say, right, for this scene, this is what I'm imagining. I like this shot from here. I think we should be moving in. What do you call it when he gets up, he's going to walk across the room. I want the camera and he's like, yeah, we're going to track him. I'm like, okay, great. I don't know all the lingo. I do know what
you want. You know what you want, but you just don't know the terms for it.
Yeah, and I'm obviously getting to know them more and more, so, but I'm saying I really started that, I mean, I remember the first time I directed, which was The Present, and I literally turned to Nael Kanj, who's the production designer, and we'd become sort of friends over this period. I pulled him close and I went, "Nael, sorry, just when am I supposed to say action?" Can you just tell me, because everybody calls out, it'll be camera, set that. And I literally, you can read that in a book, but there I was, and I'm like, shit, this is the first time. Sorry, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the first time. This is the first scene. This is the first take. And I'm not 100% sure, actually, when I was like, and he's like, okay, when this happened, that happened, action.
That's amazing.
So,
and it's really great, working in collaboration with people and being open to that. And so when it comes to writing, because in your shorts, a lot of it, the first couple ones, they were based on your writings. But when you write a screenplay, like you did for The Present and The Teacher, it's a different animal. Do you collaborate with anyone? I'm not talking about the translation into Arabic. I'm talking about the original script. Or do you prefer working by yourself?
No. So, for example, today they took my son. I worked with a filmmaker, writer called Hind Shafani, where I was adapting what I'd written. So again, all those writings were mine. And then we kind of just adapted it a little bit more, so it did come about a little bit more poetically. And so when I then came to write The Present, I already wrote the story. And then I, had some imposter syndrome because, like you said, it's a different beast when you're actually writing more traditional script, as it were. And so, basically turned to Hind again at that time and said, okay, this is a story I have. And I've never written a traditional screenplay. Do you want to co-write this with me? Well, actually, it kind of began with sort of saying, do you want to write this? And then as the process continued, I pretty much was a co-writer with her. And even when I came to direct at one point, imposter syndrome again. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's a director, and I said to her, I'm thinking of directing this film. Do you want to co-direct this with me? And she said, Farah, you don't need me to co-direct this with you. You know exactly what you want, and you should go for it.
Yeah.
And so I did. I'm working on 2 screenplays at the moment. One, I'm co-writing. Another one, I'm writing alone. So I think it just depends at this point moving forward. If I've met the right person that I think I'd like to write with. Also, it's quite lonely. So writing, I do like to write, but I don't see myself as this, prolific writer who spends,
Right.
hours and hours, right? So let's put it this way. I would direct anything I write. I won't write something not to direct it. You see what I mean?
Okay,
But I might
right.
direct something I didn't write. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so let's move on to the Arabic, which in I believe both The Present and The Teacher, Saleh Bakri, who plays the protagonist of both films, he helped you to translate from English to Arabic?
Yeah, not so much in The Present, but in The Teacher. I mean, Saleh has become, yes, more than sort of a lead actor in both my films. So we worked on a translation for the Teacher, and that's quite rare for an actor to be able to work with a writer-director on the dialogue, because it's not just translation or transliteration. I mean, it's obviously the meaning of things as well. And I know what I'm writing, but I write in English. I know what it is I mean in Arabic as well, but obviously I'm not fluent in Arabic, and I don't read and write very well at all. And so working with him, yes, and then also working, turning to him sometimes for production opinions, maybe some artistic choices. He's a very seasoned actor, somebody I could turn to when I'm feeling frustrated as well, unless he was the source of the frustration, in which case turn to someone else. So yeah, working with somebody more than once means that you get to know them.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to bring on Saleh to another episode so he can give us his experience doing that.
Yeah.
So let's move on to directing, your process in directing. So your directorial debut was the short film The Present, which won over 50 International Film Festival Jury and Audience Awards, a BAFTA award, and it landed an Oscar nomination. That was the first time you directed. So any challenges that happened there?
I don't think this podcast
She
is long
laughs.
enough. Look,
Maybe
I would say,
one anecdote.
yeah, no. I mean, look, at the time when I made The Present, I thought it was like I'd done a marathon. It was one of the hardest things at that point. You lose a location, you know, try to find your bearings with, again, where you're filming, which is occupied territory. So shooting that first checkpoint scene, for example, which is a real checkpoint in Bethlehem, that was very difficult. And I could go on and on. But when I made The Teacher, in what was a far more difficult landscape for a far longer period of time, it was like I did, 30 Ironmen, like marathon after marathon every single day. So that was far more challenging. And then, of course, things happen. Now, when you're in that kind of territory, things like Israeli checkpoints, okay, you expect them, roadblocks. So those things happened on both sets and delays were caused but you expect them. What I didn't really preempt, or I guess hadn't thought about enough, and therefore it really hit me, was the emotional, mental challenges where, like I said, you're making a film that's set in this brutal reality. You're shooting it in that reality while that reality is unfolding around you in real time. Yeah. And an example of that from The Teacher is we got word during the early days of our shoot that in the village of Berean, which is very close to where we were shooting the film, illegal Israeli settlers had descended on the olive groves on Berean and were burning them, torching them. Now, our teacher, Bassem El-Saleh from the film, is from the village of Berean. He actually says that in the film. Yeah. And as you know, you've seen the film, there is a scene where illegal settlers are torching the olive groves. So it was a very weird, warped sense of, okay, and many things happened on the ground. There were incursions by the Israeli military into the city of Nablus. We had just been shooting there just a few hours before. They started dropping bombs on Gaza for about 2 weeks towards the end of our shoot. Around 16 people were killed. Everyone was on edge in the West Bank where we were shooting. Some of my team members were saying, okay, I think it's time we leave. I was like, no, wait, we haven't finished the film. But so there's this constant pressure, not just, like I said, to do justice to the injustice that's unfolding around you, but you want to make sure everybody is safe. You want to stay upbeat and positive. So it was just a culmination of things. Yeah. Without going into the details of just cinema, we didn't manage to finish a scene till 4 a.m, or, directing a film where, So I won't go into those details, but in terms of the landscape, there was a lot.
Sure. And I heard your story about when you're making a scene in a film about a home being demolished, and then you actually see a family whose home has been demolished, and that connection, and you feeling, how absurd is this that I'm, going on set and doing this? And I can imagine it must be such a struggle, but it's so important. It's so important to get these kind of scenes to audiences, because when people see that, they find themselves in the shoes of those whom you are portraying, and that creates understanding.
Yeah.
And once you went to Palestine to make your films, as someone from the outside, were there any reactions to you that were not as welcoming? Like, was there any resentment or question mark on your role in
Interesting. I none, not that I know of, meaning in terms of the Palestinian community, of me coming, spending a lot of time there, and then making the work I was making, it's been absolutely beautiful. I have not received, I'm sure maybe there are some people, but I have not received any negativity on that front. Mm-hmm. I will have the random person who I guess is Palestinian on like social media who will make a comment about something in my films or on my films. Like, for example, this is nowhere near as brutal as what is happening, and there's anger in what they are saying. And maybe they've misunderstood cinema and art and so it's fine. It doesn't bother me. And then in terms of, maybe there are some people from the industry who are inside Palestine who maybe found it a bit. I don't know. Like I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
Maybe
no,
you've heard
no.
something.
No, I haven't. I'm just curious because, I mean, maybe from experience, because in my third year of university, I went and studied at Birzeit University in the West Bank. And it was an incredible experience. And people were so welcoming. But some people there was a sense that like, A, you're privileged. Why are you even here? And B, like, why did your family leave? You know, like sort
I
of pointing
see.
fingers, like, why did you leave? So I'm just curious, like, as a filmmaker coming to make films about Palestine, if you experienced anything like that.
I see. No, the answer is no. I haven't.
Yeah.
I've received absolute appreciation from people in terms
Yeah.
of, wow, you didn't need to come here. You are out there in the world. Yes, privileged. And so the fact that you have decided to change the trajectory of your life
Yeah.
and turn towards and come home and shoot here as well, film here. In principle, I could shoot outside. I could make films on Palestine and film them outside. And I choose not to. So on the contrary, I've had really people saying you didn't need to do this.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are actually, they appreciate, they respect.
As they should, as we all should. I want to ask you about funding, because we know that's like one of the most challenging things in getting a film made. If we were to look at it in a general sense, how does Western funding affect filmmaking in Palestine? About how daring the films are or the type of stories they tell?
I think it has an impact, actually. I'd like to think that, all Palestinian filmmakers are making films the way they want to make them and telling the story they want to tell. But I know from various personal stories of other filmmakers and so forth that, once you start to get funding from various sources and grants and so forth, then, the concept of too many cooks spoil the broth sometimes. People are going to have their opinion, are going to want to input. And some of that will be wonderful input. And some of it might be, not wishing to push the barriers of what kind of narrative can be, told, as it were. Or there might be, and I'll say it directly, sort of Zionist sympathetic opinions or fears. So I do think that it does have impact, but I think that's probably also the same for other films and filmmakers on other subjects that are considered sensitive or, controversial. There's always going to be people going to input. And it's frustrating, I'm sure.
Yeah.
For me, I've just been very blessed so far in the fact that my first few shorts, I had put in some funds of my own. So I, in many ways, had a place at the table. And I raised from funds that were not, going to have any kind of creative input, and made those first few shorts. And then as I move forward with the present and the teacher, yes, we do get some grant funding and so forth, but they'll never be the biggest honcho at the table. And so far it's meant that I've been able to hold on to creative choices, and I've been able to say no if I'm not interested in taking money, if that means it comes with some conditions that might mean changing the story I want to tell or the way I want to tell it.
Yeah.
And that in itself is incredible. And I don't know if that will be the case with every film I make. And I hope and wish it would be, but most filmmakers don't get to do that. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, just like the director, Firas Khouri, who made Alam and Maradona's Legs, mentioned that European funders mainly want stories with a sort of stagnant humanitarian view on the Palestinian situation. Nothing too resistance focused that questions the status quo. However, your film, The Teacher, is resistance focused, although maybe not in a sort of in your face way. But I wanted to ask you, after the events and the atrocities of this past year and the sort of awakening that is happening in the world. Do you think that there will be a shift in this stance of European funders wanting to just,
I don't know. I mean, look, this past year has revealed a lot. It's revealed a lot of the double standards and the hypocrisy and the political corruption that exists in our world and that we know exists, but never to such a blatant degree. And I, in some ways, think that that is a good thing, that finally the veil has been removed, the jig is up,
Yeah.
And that's an interesting landscape moving forward, because what that also has meant is that many people's eyes have been opened to the lived Palestinian experience and the reality in Palestine and the brutality of this rogue state, which, and I will call it absolutely a rogue state, and this illegal, entity that is militarily occupying, that is colonizing, and a place of illegal apartheid, right? So now it's undeniable. I mean, you even have the ICJ ruling in July where, 15 of the sharpest minds on the planet in the highest court on the planet have unanimously determined that it's all illegal and that settlement should be dismantled and so forth. So without going too much into all of that, it means that anyone with eyes that wants to see and half a brain can see. Now, I hope what that means is that funders and the industry, I hope, will be more open-minded once they've gotten over the trauma of realizing that they've been fed a whole bunch of lies. And I hope that they will be emboldened to be a bit more courageous and a bit more ambitious and a bit more ready to support more bold stories like The Teacher. I don't know is the answer, though. We'll have to wait and see. It's the industry in itself, though, just so you know, is also shrinking in some ways when it comes to funding for independent cinema, not necessarily to do with Palestine. So I remember thinking to myself, The Teacher, wasn't picked up right out of TIFF, where we premiered. But then, speaking with a sales agent and everything a year on, well, so were a number of other films that also premiered there and have huge actors in them. And, and they're like, it's the industry right now. There's, so sometimes we take it a bit too personally that it's like a Palestine thing. Right. And sometimes it really isn't. Of course, sometimes it is.
Yeah.
But, so
this is a good point to focus a little bit more on The Teacher, your latest feature film, which has gained a lot of accolades and won numerous awards. You mentioned that some Western viewers said that the character of the social worker, who's a white woman played by Imogene Poots, that she helped them see the realities of somebody who's witnessing what's happening. But what was your original idea of having this character? Why a white woman?
I've been to Palestine so many times, and I think that people who haven't been there, they don't realize, they see it as very binary of like, Palestinians, they're, I don't know, aggressive terrorist people, and then Israelis, and they just think that that's it, and they sort of exist in a vacuum of constant conflict, and that's in quotes. And I think that people don't realize that actually Palestine is full of internationals, from all over the world, including the UK, and they, whether they're volunteers, whether they're with the UN, whether they are with NGOs, whether they're international observers, and I've met many. Interestingly enough, actually, not to digress too much, but I just got a message from, I'll say, I won't give you her last name, but she's absolutely British. Her first name's Elizabeth. She's in Palestine, been working there for a while. She saw The Teacher in the cinema literally just a few days ago, and she sends me a message. You can hear in her voice she's been crying. She's absolutely moved. And she's like, Farah, and she's British, definitely, with that white. I can see the picture. I know who this person is, right? I don't know her personally, but I can see. And she's like, so I just saw your film, and I work with children in Palestine who have been through military detention. I work with children and families whose homes have been demolished. I am acutely aware of everything that's happening here. And it's a testament to the power of cinema, because even with all that knowledge and all that experience and me living here, your film has absolutely moved me and reignited the work I'm doing. And my response was, of course, wow, thank you very much. Are you my Lisa?
She's your Lisa.
And I also, of course, it was about the teacher at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Somebody who has lost so much and is living in this prison, as it were, whether it's the physical prison or the mental prison of occupation. And, to really offer the dynamic of a man in Palestine still wanting love and romance, even though he'd closed himself off. So, this is just where my creativity took me in terms of the story. And at the same time, well, in this case, why not?
Yeah. And for people who don't know that, who haven't experienced or seen that, they may say, oh, it's, this white woman, because she helped.
White savior.
She's the white savior. She's, the white savior in the film. Well, she does
but
help.
She's not. She helps. She helps. She's
look,
at one point, she, in many ways, she has joined the resistance, if you like. There's a better way of putting it. She's not the white savior at the end of the day. She's somebody who's come and has the best of intentions, has her own, traumas and experiences, has her own arc. And at the end of the day, like I said, I think that for some people, she might be perceived a certain way. And for others, like you'd mentioned and I'd mentioned, I've had white British men who've seen the film say she was their entry point, which is a beautiful thing as well.
Yeah.
And I don't need everyone to agree with every person and character and love the only person that I hope nobody walks away from and goes, yeah, I didn't like that person, is your lead, is the teacher. That's when you've done something wrong. Anyone else, that's totally fine.
Right.
So
and of course, also there's the characters of the Jewish Israeli parents of the captive soldiers. You can tell that you had empathy there, regardless of the fact that it's an Israeli soldier that was captive. But, ultimately these are parents, and you portrayed them as parents who are concerned for their child. And I'm sure that you also got reactions maybe to that.
I think the reactions are some people who are very, very obviously aware of the reality in Palestine are confused why I chose to represent the American Jewish couple whose son has gone to serve in the Israeli army and has been captured. Why have I given them screen time? Why have I, we know that they probably exist, but why have I lent that, like you said, element of empathy? For me, again, my creativity takes me somewhere. I remember when, yes, this film was inspired. One of the main inspirations is the story of Gilad Shalit, who is an Israeli occupation soldier who was captured by Palestinians and in 2006 and released in 2011 for over 1,000 Palestinian political prisoners. And I remember thinking, yes, this crazy imbalance in value for human life. But I also remember thinking, well, to that particular soldier's parents, his loved ones, what is he worth? I mean, and I always say, that hypothetical question that everyone says, when your kids say to you, what am I worth? And you're like, every parent responds, the world, the universe, you're everything. And we say that for a reason. So I remember feeling kind of on the individual level, interested and empathetic in that sense. Put aside politics, put aside occupation, all of that, just on a human level. Now, that said, this parallel between these two fathers who, yes, there is a parallel in their shared loss. But in the case of Bassem and Adam, their loss is irreversible, and they don't have a recourse for justice. That is sadly often the case for Palestinians, regardless how big the crime and how big the loss. And they have to turn to the courts and to their oppressor in the pursuit of justice. And those courts and that oppressor are complicit in the crime itself, which means that actually Bassem and Simon are actually opposite and divergent. And that dynamic was very interesting to me as well.
Mm.
So I have that couple there because I'm interested in them. I'm interested in the dynamic between them and Basim. I'm interested in the parallel, but also the divergence. These are things I want to examine and I wanted to pursue. And these are characters I wanted to create. And crazily enough, just to, watching the Democratic Party's convention where they didn't give a platform for any Palestinian.
Yeah.
And then they had a couple, an American couple, whose son is one of those being held in Gaza, who was serving in, the Israeli army.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, what a parallel there. That's fascinating.
Yeah, very much. I was going to say that the situation in Gaza and with this whole dynamic of, how many Palestinians are worth like one Israeli is just, we all are just astounded by the imbalance, that our lives
shocking.
Are
it's
nothing.
Beyond shocking. Beyond shocking.
Yeah.
Beyond. Like there are just no words to describe how sick the world is right now, to be honest, because we're not the only, obviously, injustice that's taking place, but we are a live streamed genocide.
Yes.
And it's being essentially aided and abetted by, world powers in the West that claim to hold these beacons of freedom and equality and democracy. And again, the highest courts on the planet have said this is a plausible genocide. Anyone who can see knows that it is a genocide, of course. And genocide is a strategy, not an event. So it is taking place as we speak. And again, this is the crime of all crimes. So watching this happen in real time, being aided and abetted, that's what's unprecedented and unique.
Yeah.
And yet it's being allowed to continue. And it's just watching that death and destruction again and again and again. And people also moving on, not realizing that the entire world's on trial here. Because if you don't care about what's happening now, then in principle, you don't care about humanity. You care about your privilege. If you care if it's happening in your back garden or it's happening to you, but you don't care if it's happening to another, in such blatant, crime and complicity with your governments and your tax money and so forth, then actually you don't care about humanity. So if you give up on Gaza, people don't even realize that that's the case, that we're all on trial here.
Yeah. It's selective. People are very selective, whether they know it or not. And you've got these surreal situations where a journalist like Hind Khodari is nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and she's saying, "What? I don't care about this.
What am I going to do with that?
Where am I supposed to spend
I could
this?
Be dead tomorrow."
My people are dying, and so just to tie it to the film industry, what does it take to make a political film win an award like a BAFTA or an Oscar, and is it important?
Look, I don't know. I mean, in the end, any kind of recognition and accolades, okay, other than maybe massaging an ego, which I prefer not to do, but it's nice, of course, to be recognized for your work because, put that aside. No, the reason why these things are important is because for me, it means potentially that more and more people will know and hear about a film and want to see it, and then will see it, and then hopefully be impacted by it.
Yeah.
And they go on that emotional journey that I described. And I said to you right at the beginning, I want my films to be seen.
Yeah.
So, and I want them to be seen because, yes, I've lent my artistic expression, I've sweat, blood, tears, and all of that to make this piece of art, as it were. But of course, I want it to be seen because I think it's a narrative and a story that is so important to be seen and felt and understood, especially so today at this moment in this crucial juncture in the discourse on Palestine.
Yeah. And I don't know if you are familiar with Salim Al-Baik. He writes mainly in Arabic. He's a film critic, but he said that...
I am. I think he wrote about the film. He wrote about
he did.
The teacher, yes.
And he said
it was very nice, I think.
He said that 30 years after Oslo, through this film, you revived the Fida'i, the resistance fighter, as a hero. And he talked about how it was such a subtle heroism, but nevertheless, it is the heroism of a resistance fighter that had such stigma all these years. And now, with everything being questioned again, we realize that resistance is not only a necessity, but it's a right. It's an actual right.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful assessment and reaction to the film.
Yeah.
Look, I'm never interested in placing labels on people. I'm so much more interested in examining the real life conditions and circumstances and experiences that drive someone to make the choices they make and take the actions they take.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I look at the why, and I think that that's in many ways what the film offers is let's take a journey into this particular man's world and get really close and personal and sort of understand him. And by doing that, I hope that the concept in many ways of resistance in all its forms is understood a little bit more, and that we, unless we've lived that Palestinian experience day in and day out for a year, let alone a lifetime, then we don't really get to judge. We get to just, we get to bear witness in some ways.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you have a couple of films in the pipeline. Are you able to talk about them? Give us a glimpse of what to expect.
I mean, I in some ways, I'd rather not, just because it is still early days. I will say that one film is absolutely nothing to do with Palestine. It is a film that matters to me, and I've enjoyed co-writing it, and I hope to see it made. And it's does have an element of greed is bad, in the sense that it's loosely based on an experience I had when I was an investment banker. And then there's another, which is Palestine, hopefully set Palestine and Ireland. And I'm very excited about that. And I just wouldn't want to give too much away at this point, to be honest. So
that sounds very exciting because
and then there's that third
we're loving
thing
Irish.
Solidarity. That third thing I just mentioned, that's in something that's very early, but potentially Ghassan Kanafani related.
Looking forward. And so just one last question. What advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers?
That's another podcast as well. I would say, I think as a departing advice, one of the things I would say is trust your intuition. You alone, despite having communicated everything or as much as you can, to all your collaborators and your heads of departments and all the people you're working with, you have that singular vision. Trust yourself, your intuition, because it has served me so well throughout the entire process. And I guess I would also say challenge yourself. Always look to push the boundaries of what you think you can do. And feel the fear and do it anyway. Yeah.
That's great advice. I think a lot of people who are in these creative fields can be paralyzed by fear. And it's really important to just push through those hesitations and listen to what it is you really want to do and what you believe in. And
exactly.
To believe that you can do it.
Absolutely. And I think because filmmaking really is really so grueling, in the sense that you do need a thick skin, and it's so hard to get from start to finish that so I guess another piece of advice would be try your best to work on things that really matter to you and have a depth and meaning, because it's that passion to tell that story that's going to get you through all that hardship. And then it's more likely not only to get finished, but to have the reverberations or the vibrations of something that was loved and that has come from a place of passion. And therefore, it will be presented that way in the end on the screen, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much for your time. I think the audience listening from all over the world is surely now, if they haven't already, will be interested in seeing your latest film, The Teacher, and any other upcoming projects that you have. Best of luck with those. And thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tarwida, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the best of Palestinian arts and culture. For more information, please follow us on social media and don't forget to subscribe. Salam.